his emotion. Stop. There you are, sir.
Thanks.
So this is really exciting. I always love talking to Steve because he has so many interesting facets of his career and writing life and so forth to talk about. But before we do, I did want to, in case I burst into tears 2 or 3 times during the event tonight, I wanted to explain to you all why. We lost Clive Cussler last night. We have been his bookstore for 30 years. 30 years. You know, it's just, I can hardly believe it. And Steve and his wife have had a lot of association with Clive due to Thriller and Thriller Fest. So I asked Steve if we could just say a few nice things about Clive, and then if I cry, it won't be because I don't like Steve or his book. I just want you, I've been weepy on and off all day. So what would you like to say about Clive?
Well, as I posted on my Facebook page this afternoon, Clive was a very giving guy. I mean, he was really giving to writers, new writers out of the block. He's given so many blurbs to so many writers, you can't even imagine. And I'm one of those. In 2002, my first manuscript, we sent it out to Clive. I mean, I'm a nothing writer. Nobody ever, just a first manuscript, throw it out there. And he read the book and he gave me a wonderful blurb. And he actually read the book because he critiqued the book. He sent me a letter and critiqued the dog. So, but he read a wonderful blurb. And I wasn't the only one he did that to. I can name many people who got help from him. He was a mega seller. He was huge, but he would take the time to give, those words that would help market and help people get started. That was the way he was. He was our very first thriller master and international thriller writers. He was the first one we selected as thriller master when we had our very first conference here in 2006.
And as I reminded Steve, the drunken remark I made in the bar that provoked the International Thriller Writer Conference into being, when I got tired of other authors at that conference whinging away. Clive was the lunch speaker, but he was not actually present in the bar, but I think he was kind of all over us. We had Lee Child with us and Kathy Reichs and Steve Hamilton, and I can't remember, some of you might have been there. It was a wonderful conference. But, Clive was just like always there, right?
Well, he was there for us in the beginning. He gave his time. He gave his name to go on to the first, to go into one of our anthologies, and he gave us money. He gave money to help ITW get started. We didn't have any money when we started. We were all putting our own money into it. Clive wrote a $10,000 check and said, "Here it is. Here's what you need. Go get, do what you got to do." And he was just wonderful about that. He was just one of those guys that he was successful, but he never forgot where he came from, and he was generous with his time and his words. He really was.
And it's wonderful to see what the International Thriller Writers has become. I often think, because I'm getting up to the age where I think about legacy, that might be actually the best thing I ever did was to kick that start. I didn't have anything to do other than make the provocative remark. It wasn't like, I was responsible for how it developed, but it was just the right group at the right time with the right moment, the right provocation.
And we started with nothing. Now we're 5,000 members around the world.
Yeah.
How many countries are we? 30, 40?
52.
52 countries. And so we truly are international thriller writers.
Right.
It's the guild of the thriller writers. And if you get a chance, come to Thriller Fest.
You should.
It's in New York, first week of July, and it's wonderful. I mean, you get to interact with so many writers, and they're all there, and it's a really neat week. We call it summer camp for thriller writers and thriller enthusiasts. Is what it is, just like summer camp.
And there's a reason why it meets in New York in July and not Phoenix, right?
We did it here one time.
I know, that was enough, right?
Well, it was
a lot of
actually,
reasons to
I
be in
say
New York.
quite magical because we were in the pool the whole time. And the Biltmore has that snack bar in the pool, and I can't tell you how many books were plotted in that pool. There's a lot of books plotted there.
And let me tell you, as I was hiking from our loft at 29th and 6th to the Hyatt last July for Thriller Fest, it was 99 and raining. Yeah. So I didn't really think New York was necessarily the best
place. That's why we stay in the hotel the whole time. We never leave.
Anyway, so that's where we are with Clive, and I will have some updates for you about how that is going to go forward. It's very probable that the whole Cussler verse will continue because there have been co-authors involved in it and all, but right now it's not clear what will happen. So let's talk instead about the very verse, the very universe, right? The Warsaw Protocol. So this time it's Poland.
Yes, one of my favorite places in the world, and I love Poland. I've always loved it. It's a unique country. It has a natural border on the north with the Baltic. It has mountains to the south, but there is no natural borders on the east and the west. There's not even a river there. You can just roll right through, and that's exactly what happened for centuries. It's in the heart of Europe, and it became the battleground of Europe. The Turks would come from the south, the Swedes from the north, the Slavs from the east, the Germans and eventually the French all came from the east, and they all fought on the plains of Poland. And eventually, in 1795, they wiped the country from the map. The Swedes, the Turks, and the Slavs just got together and said, "Nah, that's it, we're done," and they divvied it up among themselves. But the country came back. It came back. And then in the early part of the 20th century, the Nazis tried the same thing, and it came back. Then the Soviets tried the same thing, and it came back. It's a very resilient place, and it bred a very interesting independence streak in them. Not only that's a good thing, but it also bred some bad things, and these are explored in the novel, some fatal flaws that kind of came back to haunt them, and still haunts them a little bit to this day. The novel deals with something from the Cold War, something very fascinating that I didn't know about until I was doing the research on it. I'm not going to tell you what it is because it'll give away the book, but it is real. It's at real, and it's very interesting, and Cotton Malone gets caught up. There's also in the novel what's called the Armada Christi. I've been wanting to put this in a novel for a long, long time. These are the weapons of the passions of Christ. The holy blood, the holy lance, the holy nail, all of these. There's 7, but unfortunately there's 50 different artifacts competing to be those 7. And so I picked the 7, just the 7 that I could pick. No one really, it's a matter of faith which one you believe is real and which one is not. I've been wanting to work them into a novel and had no way of doing it because it really, okay, it's there, it's great, but so what? I mean, it's just there. But it worked here. It worked very well here because stealing one of those is your ticket into an auction. You have to bring it with you. It's your ticket in. And this is an auction for information on the president of Poland. And the United States, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, they're all vying for this information, but for totally different reasons. Each one has their own different reason. And Cotton gets caught up in the middle of that. He gets caught right in the middle of this whole chaos. He's at the auction and things go horribly wrong. And it just takes off from there. Yeah, and it's a good fast-paced story. It culminates in the salt mines outside of Krakow, 300 feet down into the salt mines, which Elizabeth and I went. Those of you who buy a book tonight, there's a little card you're going to get. Mm-hmm. If you'll turn it on the back, you will see the Mario Brothers. That's us.
Oh my God, are we on?
That's the end. I gave them that picture to put on there. I know, yeah, I knew about that. She didn't know that, by the way. She didn't know. We put on those little outfits. They make you wear those to go down. And we have on power packs and other things because when you get down there, the only light is the light on your helmet. That's it.
So what was the purpose of the salt mines?
I wanted to get a feel for it, and I wanted to see these chambers. I was there a couple years earlier, and I asked them about this. Did the Soviets, when they had control of the salt mines, did they do anything there?
Right.
Well, actually they did. Mm-hmm. They dug out some chambers that they were going to use for storage facilities. Because storage in the salt mines is great. If you're paper and wood. If you're metal, not so much. Paper and wood lasts forever down there. And so they did. They actually did. And these, the guys that took me in there had never been to those chambers before. No, they never. And we were actually not allowed to go in them. They're not supposed to go into those chambers. But we were 900 feet down. He said, "No, but who cares? I don't know what we're doing."
Is there anything in them?
No, they're empty. But there are shelves in there, though.
Okay.
Racks of shelves going up about 20 or 30 feet. Incredibly, they made them out of metal, which was insane because the metal's rotted away and the wood shelving is still there. What they put in there, no one knows. No one knows what they stored in there. He said no one was allowed to this level when the Soviets were in control of the mine. So I don't know what they had in there. Neither does anybody there know. So that's perfect for me, right? I can do what I want now. I asked them that 3 times. You sure? Nobody knows. No. Got it. Yeah. Now I can do whatever I want. And we went into this chamber. It was really neat. It's when you go down there, and I don't like enclosed spaces. You've heard me say this before, but it wasn't bad down there. It's like this. It's huge, and they have ventilation because they keep the moisture out, so the moisture won't. Moisture is the enemy of the salt mine. It will destroy it. Keep the moisture out, it'll last forever. So there's air blowing over you the whole time.
What they do, install a ventilation system?
all through there, and there's air constantly forced around, which helped with my claustrophobia. I didn't feel the claustrophobia, but we go in there and you walk in this chamber, and it's huge chamber carved out of salt with these shelves in there rotting and falling apart, and it was literally like going back in time. It was quite remarkable, and there's not a sound down there, not a sound. And if you cut the light off, you can't see your hand in front of your face. Absolute total blackness in there.
Wow,
And,
really catnip for you, wasn't
yeah,
it?
it was.
Absolutely.
And I was proud of myself doing it because I'm not wild about that at all. We got a little dicey at one point. We get to a point I said I wanted to see a salt wall. These are walls they would build out of blocks of salt to reinforce things or to close off something. He said, yeah, I know where one is. So we go down these things, and we're going through these things like a rat maze, you know. I'm like, how are we going to get out of here? I mean, I don't know where we are. But there's actually is breadcrumbs in the forms of things on the walls. There's colors, and they know how to follow the colors. So you just follow the color. He said, just always go back to white, follow the white, you'll get out if you get lost. So we got there, and there's this wall, and there's this little opening underneath it. You had to go under it. And I looked at her, and she looked at me, and I said, I'm not so wild about that. So she's not afraid of those things. So she scampered on under there. She goes right on under there. And then she gets on the other side. Yeah. She said on the other side, she says, it's no problem. Come on. Now, I didn't know if she was trying to suck me into something or not there, you know, because she'd lied to me just to get me over there. But I squeezed underneath there, and sure enough, on the other side was a chamber about the size of this area here, and there was a 400-year-old salt wall there. Been built 400 years ago there. It was quite remarkable to see it. So it's in the novel. I put it in the novel.
So I have another question. What happened to the salt?
Well, they burrow it out. What they do is they go down, they burrow down, and then they start going this way. And as they go, they find a deposit. Right. When they find the deposit, they mine it out. Okay. But they leave enough of it to keep a wall around it. Sure. And then they bore a hole, and they go to the next one. And they burrow that out, then they bore a hole, and they do it. And that's what it is. You just follow they're called drifts. The horizontals are called drifts. And you just follow the drifts, and there's little chambers, and then there's some humongous chambers, big, giant chambers. There's a cathedral down there. There's an entire cathedral carved of salt down there. And we're going to be seeing that in August when we go there on the Steve Berry Fans trip. We're going to Poland. We're going to go into the cathedral there. It's absolutely amazing, but I worked all that into it.
So presumably there was a salt industry? I mean,
yeah. They mined salt there from 8th, 9th century to about the mid-20th century.
So does one assume that at some point it was underwater? I mean, is that where the
salt millions of years ago. Millions of years ago. See, salt at one time was more precious than gold. Right. It was the most precious commodity in the world, and to find a deposit like that, it made the Polish kings quite wealthy, quite wealthy, because they had a huge deposit. The German kings had the same thing over there, where they had the salt mines. Down in Austria, they had the same thing. So salt was very, very important, and they've been mining it there, and that whole place is just burrowed out down there, just chambers. They've been digging there, for about 1,200 years. It's not a working salt mine any longer, but they do work the mine to keep it, maintain it, keep it up.
So tell us a little bit about the relic that is on the postcard that you've got. Those of you who have.
Yeah, this is the blood, the holy blood vial. We went to Bruges. You ever been to Bruges?
Yeah.
Great town, just amazing.
It also was so poor they never modernized it. It's like Tallinn, Estonia. It's come back, the fact that they didn't have an opportunity to update it over the centuries. Today it's a little money pig.
Oh, it's like going back to the 16th century. It's beautiful. We went to the Cathedral of the Holy Blood. And we sat there that afternoon and we watched the veneration of the blood. They bring it out, they set it down on this pillow, and everybody comes up to see it. And I said to her when we were watching, I said to Elizabeth, it'd be really easy to steal that. It really would. I mean, look how easy it would be.
But he said it loud.
Well,
And the security guard heard you say it.
he was okay with it. We explained what we were doing. He said, "Oh, no problem. Okay, just don't steal it." But it was so easy. There's no security. There's no nothing. You could literally walk up there and take it.
Yeah.
And so it came to me as the idea. I said, now I know how to work the Armada Christi into a store. I got it now. And I worked all that out there in Bruges when we were there. And this is the vial that you see there that they bring out each day. It's a little bit disconcerting to watch it, and I did tell her that when we were sitting there, because before you go up, you have to drop a coin into a dish. And I wondered what would happen if you didn't drop the coin in. And I wanted to do it. She wouldn't let me. I wanted to see what, because everybody goes up, drops a coin. Why do you have to drop a coin to see? You know, that's the thing. It's weird. I wanted to see what would happen if I went up and didn't drop the coin. Could I still go up and venerate in front of it? But she would not let me do it.
So I guess it would have defeated the point if you'd stolen the dish. Because that was your other
Yeah.
option,
Well,
just
no
race
one.
off
I
with
didn't
the
want the dish. I want the vial. That's what I want.
Right,
I want
yeah,
that
I get
vial.
it.
Well, the priest was right there.
The priest was right there.
So he was like, I'm not going to pay. I'm not going to drop the money. I'll just venerate. And I was like, the priest is right. He's standing right there to bless you. Get the
The
blessing.
priest stands when you drop the coin.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And then you go up and there's another priest with,
Right.
but still they're not armed or anything. You can
Sure.
still just walk up.
That you know of, that you know of, that you know of.
Well, in my novel they're not. And I came up with that whole scene with the smoke grenades and the whole thing, sitting there in the Cathedral of the Holy Blood. Yeah.
They all carry a rosary.
Yeah.
So this is a good time for me to ask Steve this question. It's been on my mind because I'm going to be interviewing Scott Turow on May 19th when he comes to us with his new novel. And years ago when I was reading the law, I remember that I attended a seminar somewhere, or no, it was a trial, and I was allowed, the judge okayed it, to do a lot of active trial work, even though I wasn't actually an accredited lawyer at that point. And I won a motion over another lawyer. He came up to me afterward, he said, "You're never going to be a good lawyer." And I thought, that's really mean, you know? I mean, just because he lost, that was sort of an ugly thing to say. And then he said to me, "You're never going to be a good lawyer because you're not in love with the law." And I really thought about that. And he was right, which is why I am a bookseller. But my question for you, and really for Scott, would be, since you are lawyers, you know, and you've now transitioned to having a passion for history and for writing, were you in love with the law? Because you were a great lawyer, and you were a lawyer for a long time.
I was a lawyer for 30 years, and I would say for the first 10 years, I probably would say that. You're fascinated with it. It's amazing. It's something. It's hard to explain, but you're actually, you can make something. You can forge something. You can make it happen, and then something happens. Here's the lawyer's life. No one ever comes to see a lawyer unless they have a problem. Nobody. It can be a good problem, like I want to adopt a child or buy a house. That's a good problem. But it's usually not. It's usually bad problems. And they come in the office, they sit down, they tell you your problem, you tell them what to do. They don't listen to a thing you say. And they blame you for everything that goes wrong. And that begins to wear up. And see, I was a street lawyer. So basically, whatever came in off the street, it just came in. Now, if you're a corporate lawyer, you can have the same problem, though, because they don't listen to what you tell them.
Right.
You can still have all of that. But what happens is, after about 10 more years, that begins to really weigh on you. About the 20th year, you really begin to resent it. You really do. And I've talked to a lot of lawyers, and there's only a few that can keep that magic going all the way through, because you get so cynical and you get so fed up with things people not listening to what you tell them to do, and then blaming you, literally blaming you for that was your fault when I told you not to do that. Exactly told you not to do it. And by the 30th year, I'd had enough. I mean, I really had. I don't know what would have happened to me if I had not become a writer, because I was really
fed up with it.
But you're so in love with history. You're so in love with your research. I didn't know if that was a lifelong thing that preceded. You know.
It did, and I loved doing. I like trying cases. I love trying cases from. I love trying cases from a jury. It was wonderful. I love trying cases from a judge. Really, basically, I didn't have a problem with that either. I really loved appellate work because you make law there. I had the great honor of making law 5 times. I had 5 questions of first impression, never been decided before by anybody in the state of Georgia. And that is exciting when you make law and change something fundamentally. That was fun. But the everyday things that you have to deal with, I did over 10,000 divorces. And so, every Thursday I did between 12 and 20, sometimes as many as 30 divorces in one day. In one day. That's our non-jury day when the judge came. And so that weighs on you after a while. You just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. It gets you in. But the other part I liked. I enjoyed making law. I enjoyed trying a case. A trial is very much like a novel. You have a beginning, a middle, and end. There's a story to be told. The only difference is it has to be exactly according to the facts in a trial, where in me, I can make up whatever I want. But it's still a story that you have to tell the jury.
And sometimes a story that contradicts the facts or doesn't adhere closely to the facts can still win in court.
It can, but you can also get yourself in trouble because if jurors see through you, and once they see through you, they quit listening to you. And when they quit listening to you, you're done. You're in deep trouble then. You've got to keep that as jurors' trust. You've got to keep it. Because if they begin to believe, nah, he's shooting me a bunch of crap now, you're dead. You're over there at that point.
However, all that is absolutely fabulous training for writing novels, and particularly writing novels where you're required to do research.
It was.
Plus, of course, if he's stolen the artifact, he might have been able to figure out a really good story to get out of it, right?
Yeah, the good part is it's just all made up. I don't get in trouble. I don't get in trouble.
So I also said that we would mention the reason that we have out the flyer for Mr. Rollins. Who
I
is
know,
a
he's been
friend
driving
of
me
yours.
crazy all day. He has, because he wants to know how handsome he is. The president of Poland in this novel is named James Czechowski. And that is his name. James Rollins' real name is James Czechowski. And I made him the president of Poland. I didn't tell him till Monday.
However, when I read the arc, I absolutely cracked up because when I got to the president of Poland, I thought, "Oh my Lord, it's really."
Well, see, he didn't get an arc.
No, I know, but I did. So in the write-up I did in the book news and so forth, I mentioned specifically, that James Rollins fans would particularly enjoy reading this book, and now you know why.
He sent me an email Monday, and he says, "What's going on with this book? What is this?" And I told him, and he writes back. He doesn't say thank you or it's great honor or whatever. He writes back and says, "Am I handsome?" That's what he said. I said, "No." He said, "Do I do anything bad?" I said, "Kinda, yeah." But he's reading it now. He got his book Tuesday. We have a little thing. I buy his book, he buys mine. We've always done that to each other. When we see each other, we get them signed. So he's reading it now. So I went to see what he said.
So Jim is another author with a different career path to get him to be an author because he's a veterinarian. And, again, I'm not entirely clear why he jumped to being a writer.
Well, he had the little voice in his head. Just like I've said, a little voice. Every writer has a little voice in his that tells them right. He had that. And Jim's been very helpful to me. He was the reason why I quit practicing law.
Was he?
Yeah. I mean, he's been very helpful to me. It was 2008, actually 2007, and it got to a point where I had the practice and then I had the books. Right. I wrote 7 books still as a lawyer, and it was getting a little much now. I mean, there was a lot going on, and we were in Fiji teaching at a writers' conference that Jim had been invited to and I had been invited to, and we were sitting there and I asked him, I said, "Jim, I got to make a decision." So he told me how he made the decision to quit, and I followed his advice, and he was right, and that's how I quit. That's why I quit. He was very methodical about it. Don't tell him I'm complimenting him. It's going to be hard to live with. Because it's on Facebook. He's probably watching right now.
You've already said he's not handsome, and he's
Yeah,
up to no
he's
good.
watching
So you
probably
try to
right
redeem
now.
him here.
But he said, let's do an experiment. How much do you make as a lawyer? And I told him, and I said, okay, how much you make a day? We figured it out. How much do you make writing a book? And I told him. I said, well, how many pages a day can you write? And I told him, and we did the math. And then the number for the books was greater than the number for the law. And he said, that should tell you something at this point. You know, that's not definitive because it can end tomorrow. You got to be careful about that. That's not. But he said that's a real good indicator of where you are. And then we looked at the backlist and we looked at all that. And he went through the same analysis he went through when he quit being a vet.
Sure.
And it was very helpful. And I quit practicing law the next year. And it was scary because I made a great living practicing law. What I made as a writer, it was just gravy. It was just I didn't need one dime of it. And I'm giving up, you know, my income and walking away from it. And we didn't burn the bridge, we nuked the bridge. I sold the building. I mean, the building's gone, the library's gone, the files, I watched them destroy the files. It took like 4 hours one morning to shred them all. You know, yeah, we took them out to this truck that came with a big shredder in it, and we hauled them out by the wheelbarrow for 4 hours and just shredded every one of them. And I said, this is over, buddy. I mean, I got nothing. It's gone. And thank goodness it worked out, because 12 years later, I get to do it full time now. And it was her fault too. She was also on me to quit, very much so.
So for a while in this career path that we've been doing, you wrote, is it 5 novels where you decided to set them all in the United States and look at interesting problems here? Why did you decide to go back to international?
Because that's really what I like the best, to be honest with you. I like international stories. I did the American stories because I wanted to explore those constitutional issues that I had come up with. They were my ideas. No one had ever touched them before. And they were fun stories. And it was also a way to build readership here. This is the major leagues of publishing, is America. I mean, all of the world's great, but you've got to be good here. Got to be really solid here. And I wanted to build the brand here. And so we did that for those 5 years, and it did build the brand here. And then we went back with the Malta Exchange International, and he'll stay international now for a long time.
Well, of course, he's in Copenhagen, so
yeah, that's where he
makes a
lives.
certain amount of sense.
But the so what of the novel is international, not American,
Right.
where those 5 books were.
There's an awful lot to explore. Do you think that the whole coronavirus is going to inspire you at some point?
I don't do the medical stuff.
No, but I was thinking about the complications in the global supply chain and various
Well, that's
fallouts from it.
Could be something like that maybe, but I've never been a bioweapon or bio thing or anything like that. I just don't have that in the books. But it is interesting how that could affect stock markets and supply chains and everything.
And value too.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
Just look at the news today.
You just don't realize how much is made in China. You're
you know,
beginning to
that
learn
has been a revelation, and also how many businesses there are dependent upon the supply
I mean,
chain.
I never realized how many wedding dresses are made in China. The entire wedding dress industry is teetering because they all come from China. And I didn't know that. I mean, right now it's okay, but they're worried about special orders and special things like that. They're all made in China, everything. That's really amazing. I just never realized that.
There's a lot of printing that's done, although I think maybe more of it's in Taiwan than it is in China, but a lot of color printing for a lot of, you know, is done in that area. But you're not quite old enough, but after World War II, made in Japan was a synonym for cheap.
It was.
And all kinds of stuff migrated to Japan because the cost of labor and whatever it all was, and then Japan basically priced itself up, and then it went to China.
I remember that.
There's a lot of it in India. Its markets are manufacturers seeking the cheapest way to go, but this may be a wake-up call.
It's a
that
little bit of a
it's
revelation.
maybe more expensive to do that than it would be to stay here and pay higher prices.
None of us really realize how much. We know a lot, but it's more than a lot. It's huge, is what it is.
It truly is. So do you want to give us a hint about where you might be traveling for the next book?
Where we're going, the next book's finished, because you stay a year ahead, so you turn it in for next year. He's going to 3 new places next time, which is a lot of fun. He's going to South Africa, South America, and Switzerland. And I've never had him in any of those places, and it was fun. And it's a really interesting story that deals with something that came out of World War II, and it will center in Germany. It'll finish up in Germany. And it's called The Kaiser's Web. It'll be out next year.
it's a really good story. I really liked it. I'm writing the book now that will be turned in next year to be published in 2022, and it'll have a German theme to it as well, a little bit of German theme. And then we're headed to Romania in April.
Love Romania.
We're going.
Was there year after year?
2.5 weeks we're going to spend there. We're going to go all over Transylvania area, then down into Bucharest, because I'm going to do a novel there in probably 2023 or 24 is going to be set in Romania.
You can learn to pronounce Ceausescu, which you can hardly escape it when you are in Romania, especially in Bucharest.
It's a lot there. It's an interesting country. I've been reading all about it. There's something fascinating there that comes out of World War I that I came across, and I'm gonna get caught into Romania.
Sounds great. I have photos. We could do a
Yeah,
whole
folks,
photo show.
I'm gonna take a whole bunch myself when we're there in April.
So, questions from all of you. Who would like to ask any?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question on your process.
Sure.
Can you tell me, go through a day?
A day for me is I like to do 1,000 words a day.
Okay.
That's a good day for me.
Okay.
Sometimes you do a little more, sometimes less, but 1,000 words is a good day. So starts about 7 a.m. I'm a morning person, so unlike Diana Gabaldon, who's a night person,
Right.
she writes in the middle of the night. I'm a morning person, so I go from around 7 a.m. to about 11. Then I stop an hour, come back, go to about 2 o'clock, 2:30. That's about 6 hours, and that's about all the brain can take for the day, of creating that. And I usually can do my 1,000 words during that time
Are
period.
they 1,000 good words?
No, they're okay words. My first drafts today are much better than the first drafts of years ago. But I'm going to go through the book 40 or 50 more times. But they're acceptable words. They're not something that I would be just completely mortified of to look at. But they change, because I'm thinking of things as I'm going along. And then I do the business of writing, research, that kind of thing in the evening, and then do it again. And so I'm in that mode right now because I want to get done. I want to be done by Christmas. Yes, ma'am.
Well, your inspiration, it seems like you've got these downloads of this phenomenal in terms of the intricacy and the complex, levels. You bring it all together. Is that something, it feels like maybe you just dreamed this. It's like, did I dream this and recall? How much of it is inspiration? How much of it is research? Is it like I think probably a blend?
Well, it's a little of both. The research is where I discover it, because that's why I can only do the research, because I know what I'm looking
Right.
for. And it's a constant process, because I'm using about 400 books when I'm writing the novel. I'm not reading 400 books, but I'm reading good chunks of 400 books. And I'm picking out the nuggets. And my research is about this tall when I'm done. I'm only going to use about 10% of it.
Okay.
90% of that's never going to make it. So I go through and make those decisions and keep thinking it through, and the book keeps evolving. So those words I wrote down are going to alter quite a bit during that whole process. I'm a firm believer in the rule of writing, that writing is rewriting. So you have to write it over and over and over again.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, so do you write chronologically,
Yeah.
or do you go from situation to situation and then
No, I
follow
write it
that?
chapter. There's no way I could skip around, because I'm foreshadowing and then I'm clicking it up, and I can't do that. It would make I never remember it. I'd never be able to come back. I've almost never skipped and gone ahead. So I keep it just one chapter at a time. It'd be lovely if I could outline before I started, but there's no time. So I outline as I go, and I try to stay 50 pages ahead of myself.
Do you know the end when you
Yeah.
start?
Always,
Okay.
because you
Okay.
you have to start a novel. Where do you start a novel? You start it as close to the end as possible. How close do I get? 24 to 72 hours. Those are my books, basically, in that frame. So I get as close to that moment as I can get. Now, does the end change? Yeah, sure, it'll change up, but I know generally what's going to happen. I only wrote one book where I didn't know the end. I violated my own rule, and don't do it. It's bad. It's bad. And I wrote a very bad ending that someone in this room said it was the most horrible thing she ever read in her entire life. And I don't want to say who that person is in this room. I'm not going to speak ill of Elizabeth. And she did. She was all. But the worst part was she read it. About 2 hours later, my editor calls, and she says it's the worst thing you've ever wrote in your entire life. And then my agent calls and says, "What happened with that ending? It's so bad." Now, none of them had talked to one another. So you had 3 people telling you it was awful. It was pretty awful.
Did you change it then?
Oh, I did. Yeah, it took me a month, because I had to go and redo. You have to redo a whole bunch of other stuff to make it work. Now, the end is much, much better. Oh yeah, there's no question about it. I was trying to do something different and a little different, and you can't be that different, as she reminds me all the time. She's so lovely.
So when you were at the Amber Room, because you were here for the Amber Room, and
I'm trying to see my picture somewhere. It used to be up there. I look for it every year.
we're actually redoing, sadly, back to our original theme, so many of the authors whose pictures are hanging there are no longer with us, that we are going to probably have like a memorial.
Oh, that's
Well,
good.
not you.
Not me yet. No, I'm gonna do it. Don't get me off of that wall now. I used to be up there because I look for it every year.
I can just see from here, I can see Jackie Collins, for example, and I can see Edna Buchanan, and I can see P.D. James, and, you know, I mean, 30 years is a very long time, you know, to be.
Well, I sat right here, remember?
Yeah.
There's like 10 people here. What many people? What many
We
people?
were a relatively small group, and at that point, since you'd gone on to write the Romanov, I thought maybe that you were going to be like a Russian writer, you know, like Martin Cruz Smith or something.
Yeah, I did too.
Most of his books have been in Russia.
I did too, and then Third Secret came along, and then everything changed for me with Templar Legacy. That's what changed everything.
Right.
That's when Cotton was created, and that was the book. It's still my #1 seller to this day. It's still at the top of the list to this day.
I think that just the very word Templar is kind of magical.
It was magic then. It really was.
It still is.
It's still pretty good now, but it was really hot back then.
Yeah,
It was magic.
That's because Dan Brown wrote it.
God bless his soul.
Yes.
This gentleman had a hand right over there.
I saw, just speaking of the Templar legacy, a lot of your books feature an intersection between religion and power and the conflict
I
that's
vote that
inherent
they do,
there.
yes.
So why is that? What's your
Well, I wanted to
fascination?
explore that, and I also want to explore the difference between faith and religion. All the books deal with that as well. The difference, you know, faith is something completely different than religion. It's the merger of those two that get us into trouble. And so I did 5 books on that. I did, you know, Templar deals with the Catholics. No, I'm sorry, Third Secret was the Catholics. Templar was the Protestants, and then Lincoln Myth dealt with the Mormons, and Alexandria Link dealt with the Jews. And so I got them all. I made sure I didn't.
Buddhist books? Come on.
I would love to do one with that. Be honest with you, I really would. I just haven't found the right. I really would, because I don't know much about that religion, and I would love to learn more about it. When I wrote Alexandria Link, I knew very little about the Jewish faith. I wanted to know. I had to learn about that, and it was, and the Mormons the same thing with the Lincoln Myth. So I would love to do something like that. I just haven't found the story yet.
I'm sure we'll. Right. Anyone else have a question?
Yes, sir.
You talked about the resiliency of the Polish people. As you were writing the book, did you come to any conclusions as to why that would be for them particularly?
Well, they have a very fierce independent streak in them because of the fact they were constantly invaded. So they protected fiercely their territory and their area. And it has a lot to do with that. The fact that they were just sort of beat up all the time. And they developed this streak of, we want to be left alone. And for a while, in the 14th, 15th century, they were a very powerful nation. They had a lot of power to them for a while. Then it began gradually. They made a mistake, made a fatal mistake. They decided to start electing their king. Now, you can't elect a king. You either got to have it inherited or don't have one.
No politics
No.
tonight.
And then what they would do is amazing. They would gather on a plain and they would get in a big circle. And if you wanted to be king, you got in the middle of the circle and you told everyone there what you would do if you were king and what you would give if you were king. And they literally competed against, that's how they campaigned. What will I give you? Now, of course, once they became king, guess what? They didn't have to honor any of that stuff. But there was a provision in the Constitution that said, if you do not honor your promise, they can remove you. Now, you can imagine the chaos this caused. Because what happened after a while is they didn't elect anyone who was Polish. They started electing people outside the country who had no connections to anybody. And, of course, they didn't give a damn about Poland. So the whole country began. And then they got worse. They created a parliament for the noblemen to be in. And they had a rule that said every single act of parliament has to be enacted unanimously. One person can vote no, over, done. Now you imagine how much they got done, right? So what happened is they paralyzed themselves internally and eventually destroyed them. It just destroyed the government. That was the problem with them. They were very fiercely independent, so much so that they had these crazy ideas and they didn't have good self-government, and it fell apart. And to this day, that's still a problem. Their centralized government is still fractured and still has a lot of problems with it right now. That's explored in the novel as well.
There have been other occasions where kings have been elected. I think that Bernadotte, if I recall right, he was one of Napoleon's marshals. When the Swedish royal line had hit a dead end, they brought, I'm trying to remember if they actually elected him, but I think they did, to be the king.
Well, choosing someone like they did with
But that was a
William and
one-shot
Mary
thing.
of Orange,
Yeah.
But not in Poland. You promised these people what you were going to give them, and of course they elected the one who was going to give them the most, and they never honored those things, and it just fell apart. The whole country just went down terrible, and eventually in 1795 it was eradicated. It was just wiped off the map.
So I was interested in your comment about South America. We had a discussion Monday night with Josh Hood, who's writing the Ludlam reboot, and I'm trying to remember who was here just before. Anyway, his book is set in Venezuela, and I'm going blank about who it is it's Brad Taylor, who set his book in Brazil to a great deal of the book. So the question is South America becoming a more interesting theater for thriller?
Yeah, mine's in Chile, where I set mine. And
that's the German nexus, because they have the biggest
correct.
population of
and there's a
Germans.
connection between the two.
Yeah.
Between the two. There's a lot of things I wanted to explore. I've been wanting to explore this book, and I was able to do it. So South America fascinates me because of I don't know much about it. So I want to learn more about down there and that whole connection down there. And so I think I'll have Cotton go back some more.
Well, Josh pointed out, and it's really true, that South America actually is a bigger threat to us because it's closer than many of the territories that thriller writers tend to explore. So I'm just curious that Jack Ryan's second season was set in Venezuela. Terrible storytelling, but a lot of exciting stuff. I mean, if you really go back and look at the plot, it doesn't make any sense at all. But did you happen to watch it?
I did watch it.
Did you find a few holes in the story?
There was some interesting things there because a couple of the issues I had already tackled in the book I finished.
Ooh.
A couple of the issues that they had.
But you did a better job.
I
right?
hope so.
Brad
I don't
did
know. Yeah, but I was a little. When I was watching, I was like, "Oh crap!" Where'd you get? I didn't. They're very obscure. They're very obscure, and I somebody picked, but they touched on it where mine is the heart of the novel.
Right, but I thought it was interesting that the whole thing was set in Venezuela, which is not, because we're more accustomed to being in the Middle East or Russia or.
It is, and it's interesting down there. Particularly Chile. Chile fascinates me because it has a large German population, and so does Argentina over towards the western part of Argentina.
And look at Brazil; it has a huge Japanese population, and of course Portuguese, and some Germans. So South America's actually dealt with immigration and diversity and all these buzzwords probably as much as we have.
I've been wanting to send Cotton there, so I'm glad I got it. He'll go back.
Excellent.
Send him back. He'll go back.
Anybody have a final question? Oh, hello, Patrick, you're back.
I'm back.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
Great.
One more question, anybody? Going once? Oh, okay.
Steve, on your books, so much of it is on your research that you draw in. How much of your books are related to the facts you have, and how much do you supplement?
The whole I've dug for myself, and I complain about it a lot. And this is her talking, by the way, here. 'Cause when I complain about it, she reminds me that I dug the hole, not with a shovel, but with a giant backhoe, and dug this hole for myself. And the hole is I want to keep it as close to reality as possible. I want it as close as I can, and I keep it about 90% to reality. I keep it as tight as I can keep it. I got to trip it up. I got to change some things, and I do change those things, and I tell you what those are in the writer's note. So that's the niche I've cut for myself, is I keep the book as real. The so what of the novel, the thing from the past, it would be so simple if I could just make it up. But I just make up whatever I want and do it, but you wouldn't like that because you know I made it up. You want something real, something you can say that. You can go read about it. Yes, that existed. That's there. And so that's the niche I've cut for myself, as I keep it as close to reality as I can keep it. And 90% is about where it is. And that's what takes so long to write the book. That's why it takes me a year to write the novel, because I keep it as tight as I can to that, and try not to vary off of it as little as possible.
So from this conversation last Wednesday, when Jack Carr was here conversing with Mark Greaney, which I think is going to flip on April 13th, and Mark is going to come back and converse with Jack, a question was asked about whether either of them likes to have a companion or take their spouse on their research trips or not. Now, I think we've already answered that question here this evening. A better
She's
question
always-
would be, could you actually do this without Elizabeth?
No, it wouldn't be any fun. It's more fun with her. It's much more fun with her. It would be, I've done it by myself.
Right.
I've done it and I didn't care for it too much. No, it's more fun that way. And she's also very good because I get discouraged. I get aggravated.
Yeah.
Because when I go on the research trips, I don't know what I'm going to find. If I knew, I wouldn't have to go. I mean, I already know. I got to find it. And I get very frustrated. And she'll say, just sit down, take it cool, let's think about it. Because we'll sit in a church for 3 hours. I'll sit, and we'll just sit there and just stare. That's all I do is stare, trying to figure things out. And she's very patient about it. Of course, she has to be paid at some point, and she wants to find the newest Louis Vuitton or Prada or whatever. Because she's already found one here. You see right there, she found it. So she tells me the muse must be paid at some point, and that's fine. But she's very good about that, and she's very it's much more fun. I mean, we went down the salt mine. It was a lot of fun, really. I mean,
Well, my point was really it's a team effort.
Yeah,
You know, I
it
always
is.
think not just of Steve, but I always think of you too, Liz, as
Oh,
part
it's
of
always a
that.
team
So,
effort. Yeah.
you know,
It's been a lot of years of crazy Cotton Malone stories.
She comes up with a lot of concepts and ideas because I'm bouncing ideas off, and she'll say, "No, that's not stupid. Try this," or "This is not dude."
Does she stick up for a character or two?
I have Cassiopeia.
That's what I thought.
Oh yeah. Oh,
You would have dumped her, right? But
I would have got rid of her a long time ago. Yeah.
Right. So those of you, I guess, should really think.
Cassiopeia is not in this novel for a reason because I wanted to explore Cotton's relationship with someone else, but not in a bad way. Not in a bad
Right.
way, but there's another agent in here that he comes in contact with, and I wanted to explore that a little bit. She's back next year though. She'll be in the Kaiser's Web. She'll be
Excellent.
there. Yeah.
Well, now that we are done with our conversation, it's time to give away the James Rollins book, Art That I Promised.
It will
Larry?
make great kindling in
How
your
many
fire.
members
This thing burns really good. Just light it up, baby, and let it go. He's watching right now. He'll send me an email and just about want to get it.
All right, I need you to pick a number between 1 and 44. 35, sorry. You should, those of you who bought a book will have a ticket with a number in it. So if Steve will pick a number between 1 and 35.
28.
28. Oh,
28.
Lots of sad faces here. You have to
Oh,
look
we
at
got a
your book.
winner.
All right.
Oh, there we
There's a
are.
winner.
Wonderful. Interestingly enough, it's almost always 17. So I'm serious. You guys should jockey for 17. Very close, you guys. Anyway, let's give Steve a round of applause. I'd also like to thank or did you turn it off? Thank our video audience for joining us. We're a little casual here this evening. So thank you so much for participating. If you would like to